European leaders have been pushing for tougher migration policies today, with Denmark and the UK taking a high-profile role in driving a stricter approach across the continent. Meeting in Brussels, EU ministers have been debating new measures against migrant smuggling, while in Strasbourg, the Council of Europe has been considering steps that could make deportations easier. Copenhagen and London have already set the tone. Their prime ministers were arguing in a joint op-ed for The Guardian that Europe must curb entry for economic migrants. France 24's reporter in Brussels, Dave Keating, joins us right now. David, thanks for joining us. What exactly have European ministers been pushing, both in Brussels and in Strasbourg?
Yeah, there's been a lot of action on the migration front over the past weeks, but it's been a long time in coming. So over at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, that's not an EU body, that is a larger organization that includes all of the countries of Europe, critically including the UK. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, has been pushing for quite some time for a reform of the European Court of Human Rights rules. She says those rules were set all the way back in the 1950s, and they're not suitable when it comes to rules on asylum for the modern day. Well, in that, she was joined by the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. They wrote this joint op-ed in the Guardian newspaper. Now, they're both from center-left parties, and that's really key here because they said that, quote, responsible governments need to act on their citizens' concerns, and that failure to do that would allow populists to win. So they really want to show that progressive center-left parties can offer a solution here to try to stop the stem of the tide over to populist parties. Now, ministers from the Council of Europe are gathered there in Strasbourg today to start discussing this, but this will be a long process, and there will for sure be a lot of dissenters. So this isn't something they're going to be able to do overnight, but British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been fighting back criticism from the opposition Reform Party, the far-right party in the UK, as well as the centre-right Conservatives, who want the UK to pull out of the ECHR entirely. He's saying, no, we can work with others to reform it, to stop measures on asylum being blocked by the court. Then separately, here in Brussels, we finally had a council agreement on the asylum package that was put out by the Commission a long time ago. This is a long, long saga. The EU has been trying for many years to reform its asylum policy. Right now, they're going on rules that date from many, many years ago, the Dublin regulation rules, which say that countries have to return asylum seekers to their original country of entry. That has been causing all kinds of problems, but national governments haven't been able to agree on one joint way forward to fix it, to come up with a new system of asylum rules. However, this week they have come to an agreement between national governments to finally get some rules in place, and that is expected to be approved shortly in a further vote by the European Council of National Governments and the European Parliament. The bloc was really in the Council, so this agreement among member states means that this is finally moving forward. So I think this does show that Europeans are understanding that citizens are concerned about migration. However, the problem is doing this in this legal way, it doesn't happen overnight, and that can make citizens frustrated when they don't see action.
And this is, of course, all in the context of Donald Trump's national security strategy, which paints Europe as weak and has heavily criticized Europe's migration policies.
Exactly. Now, these recent moves are not due to his comments over the past days or that national security strategy that was issued by the United States last week. Like I said, these motions have been in motion for a long time. However, I'm sure that the countries have this in mind, the European leaders, when they are taking these votes, when they're discussing this at the Council of Europe. They will be keen to present this to Donald Trump as if this is his doing. That's really what the European leaders have been doing for a year now. They take things that they were maybe going to do anyway, like red tape cutting exercise, rowing back on some of the EU's climate rules, and they tell Donald Trump, we're doing this for you. We're doing this because you asked us to. And so I think we can expect, if we do get movement at the Council of Europe and in the EU to reform immigration rules, again, they're going to tell Donald Trump that it was his doing. In reality, these are processes that were a long time in coming. The problem is, it isn't harmless when they do that, when they tell Donald Trump that it's his doing, because it further gives him the impression that he is the, quote, president of Europe, as he himself called himself, or earlier this week when he pointed out that European leaders call him daddy. It continues to give this impression that the United States is the most powerful country in Europe, is running the show in Europe, and indeed Politico just named Donald Trump the most powerful man in Europe today. So this is all feeding into this impression, even though these migration policies have been in the works for some time.
Dave Keating, I think we'll refrain from calling him daddy here at France 24, but thank you so much for your outline there on everything that's been going on around migration in Europe.